Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Today, I'm excited to welcome Tommy Beyer to the show with over 20 years in hospitality. Tommy worked his way from operations to general management and later helped found a real estate investment trust along with launching his own asset management consultancy. He's overseen portfolios of up to 20 hotels and now focuses on helping owners drive revenue, cut inefficiencies, and navigate the complexities of hotel ownership and development. His expertise spans asset management, acquisitions, franchise negotiations, and operational strategy. Tommy, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to chat with you today.
Yes, me too. So tell us about your journey. You've done so much over the years. What has that been like through the ups and downs? And how did you get to where you are today?
Well, my first job in the industry was as a valet at a four-diamond resort in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a Wild Dunes is the name of it's a complex. And it was, at the time, it was managed by Destination Hotels and Resorts. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth. It was a little boutique. It was like 94 rooms. I worked there while I was in college at the University of South Carolina, just going there for a degree in hotel management. So my dream was to go run a big Las Vegas resort. I was wanting to do that. So I was sort of working towards that. And as I was graduating college, I had an offer to go to the Venetian and work out there. But so happens that it was 2008. And I decided I was going to get married about 6 months later. And I said, I'm either going to get married or I'm going to go work in Vegas. I can't do both. So luckily for me, I passed on Vegas and I got married. And next year, they laid off 1,000 people. So because it was a great financial crisis. So I became a general manager of Hampton Inn at the time down in Savannah, and then worked my way up to a general manager of a Hilton Garden Inn, and then stayed with the same management company for another 10 years. So I went and worked in their corporate office as a director of financial analysis and budgeting, and worked through that for a few years, and then started as a VP of operations. So I oversaw portfolios of 15 to 20 hotels up and down the East Coast. Some resorts were as large as 500 rooms down in Orlando to 50 or 75 room Hampton Inns. So I did that for a while, got a chance to work with a bunch of different ownership groups, some large publicly traded REITs and some large family offices, and then plenty of one-off ownership groups. And then I moved into business development with the same management company for a few years, and I helped grow their portfolio about 40% during COVID. So we picked up about 18 hotels, and then decided one day that it was time to see the world from the other side of the table. So I helped found a private REIT with a partner, and also started my own asset management and consulting firm. So sort of a long 20-year journey, lots of ups and downs, but luckily for me, more ups than downs, but it's been fun. Enjoyed it.
Especially with the 2008 crash. I mean, that's the year I also got married. And it was quite an interesting time. I'm sure you've seen so many ups and downs throughout your career. What's one of the things that has been like the most challenging and maybe also insightful, but also the thing that excites you the most, that just makes you smile ear to ear in everything that you do?
I mean, '08 was tough, right? I think, COVID was a lot more difficult for hospitality. It sort of changed the landscape of things. And luckily, I wasn't in operations then, but I was certainly impacted by it. So that was tough. But I think, ultimately what keeps you going is this industry is, it's resilient. And, in my role, I get to still serve guests and clients clients to be, my clients are more my guests, right? So as a GM or I was working front desk or whatever, it was always exciting to make somebody's day for one reason or another. We give them an upgrade or we give them a free, drink at the bar or what have you. Or somebody's coming in with their family and you send their kids over to the pantry and they get some free stuff. It's nice. They get excited. But now it's, how can I take care of my clients? How do I make sure their hotels are running well? How do I go back to them with good information and positive news and delivering additional revenue or more savings or whatever? So I'm always sort of looking for those nuggets to take back to them and say, this is what I've done for you and so on and so forth. But it's been fun for sure.
Is that the main thing that you think owners and investors want to see, is just more revenue? Is that what makes them happy?
I mean, ultimately, every owner is a little bit different, but I haven't met an owner yet who doesn't want more profit. Yeah. Revenue is important, but they want profit for sure. So,
especially in this market.
Yeah, for sure. And there are some owners that are, really driven by high guest satisfaction scores, but most of them are more concerned about the bottom line.
And what are the kind of common mistakes that you see these investors make that tamper with increased revenue?
Oftentimes, it's not putting enough money into the property and not spending it in the right areas, right? So you have a PIP or a renovation that's due and you push it off, or you kind of shortcut it. I mean, the guest they'll either reward you for taking good care of your property and upgrading it, or they won't and they'll just leave, right? So I see that happen pretty often, right? So owners are really concerned about revenue shortfalls and so on and so forth, but then they don't want to upgrade the property. Meanwhile, your competitors have already done that. So then you're just going to continue to kind of fall behind, right? So it can be kind of a death spiral for a lot of properties.
Yeah. I've seen that. We did a market analysis for a ton of hotels in our local market, and that's what I saw. I saw the ones that invested in a PIP, they survived, and the ones that didn't ultimately couldn't keep their doors open and had to sell or to franchise. And it was a really tough position, because at that point, you see that the renovations are going to cost so much more than if there would have been upkeep in order to stay ahead of the competition.
Yeah, it's true. Owning a hotel is not the faint of heart, right? You have beyond what's on the PIP, you've got MEP, you've got things that are just, going on behind the scenes that the guests aren't going to pay you for. They're just going to expect that, there's not leaks in their room and the air conditioning works and some of these things, but the PIP may not necessarily call for that. But that's on top of it, right? So to your point, if you have deferred maintenance, it's just going to stack up on you by the time you have to go do your PIP as well.
Why do you think so many owners are so averse to having, to doing it on time or doing it to the extent that they should? Is it that they don't understand how impactful that's going to be to their ROI?
Depends on the owner profile, right? So there's a lot of owners that come from different industries, so they don't quite grasp that, right? So if you're, let's say you're coming from multifamily, you get that a little bit better than some other owners, certainly than from like somebody in industrial or, some other vertical. But even in multifamily, people are leasing and renting for a year or 6 months or 9 months, or whatever it is. So it's a little harder for those guys to break their lease because you didn't upgrade, the kitchen countertops. But at a hotel, somebody walks in, sees it's old, dated, not well kept up, they'll walk right out, right? And then go to the hotel next door and go stay there, right? So,
literally. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
so,
literally.
I think people don't really think that, or there's sort of unrealistic expectations at times.
I would say, to your point, that I think that the hotel model is really a model for all industries. And I think that even with multifamily, I know things are really tough right now in that market, but I think that the keeping up with the property maintenance and just refreshing it and making sure that it's driven to what the market actually wants and needs is vital for occupancy to stay up, whether it's multifamily or hospitality or any other asset type, and also what you can charge for it too. Are you seeing that now more so than ever, or are you seeing things kind of slow down?
Keeping rate is a challenge, right? I think, again, those who have kept up with their product are able to sort of hold rate a little bit better, and those who haven't kept up with it have to drop it further. So I think that's more of a challenge now. And then beyond that, it's the same thing that happens when, let's say, there's a citywide or some large event going on in that market. Again, if you've taken care of your property, that ceiling sort of gets raised. And if you haven't, you can't raise up as much, right? So it's interesting. I wish more owners would get that point point, but not all of them do.
Right. So you're seeing a direct correlation between how dated a property is or how well maintained it is, and obviously being able to increase rates apart from where it's located.
Yeah. I mean, a good general manager, a good property manager, a good DOS can solve for a lot, but it's really hard for them to solve for product issues. And you're not going to hang on to those folks too long, because eventually they'll get tired of, dealing with that, and they'll move on to a property that's been renovated or an owner that's going to take care of the property.
So what would be your biggest advice to owners and investors out there who are looking to invest in hospitality in order to, renovations are obviously very expensive, and that I understand in terms of having a difficult time to upkeep with a PIP. What would be your advice to them in order to balance hotel renovations with still maintaining the biggest ROI?
I mean, you brought it up a second ago, but it's spending money that makes sense for your market and for your customer and clientele, right? So maybe it means pushing back on the brand because they want you to re-image your porte-cochere. Like, people aren't going to pay you $10 more per room because, the drive up is really nice. They're just not going to do that. Or that you've painted your building the latest color of gray that's out there, or whatever the case is. So
it's not gray. It's not gray anymore.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It was beige, then it was gray. I don't really know what it is.
Now it's beige again. It's a grayish, actually.
Yeah, so people aren't going to pay you extra money for that, but they might if you've got mattresses that are really comfortable, or you've got furniture and lighting that doesn't look like it's from 2000 or whatever. So I think you have to be smart about that. Or if you have TVs that are able to stream Netflix versus TVs that barely work. Right.
Or cable. Nobody cares about cable anymore.
Yeah. So I think it's just spending smart money and making sure that you've got fast internet, and all this stuff is pretty basic, but there are some owners that will just piecemeal their renovations, and it'll take them forever. And by the time they're done piecemealing it, they really need to start all over again. And the hotel's sort of in this state of renovation. I don't really think you get as big of a bang for your buck there. I think it's more disruption for your team and for the guests. So, as much as you can, try to stay away from that approach. I think that's sort of the better way to look at it.
So how do they do that? How do they make sure that, like, there was a president that said, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. I feel like that is so appropriate for when it comes to any kind of CapEx spend, right? You need to have that plan in place. What do you do in your world, and how do you advise them to make sure that they're really sharpened and they're ready for reno?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, obviously you want to, create CapEx budgets every year and try and, hold pretty close to those as best you can. But beyond that, every hotel is a little bit different, right? I mean, it's, there's some that the brands, Hilton has just gone to this recently with their fixed renovation cycle management, but, there's some brands that are holding you to the soft goods every 7 years and case goods or full reno every 14, but not every brand is doing that, right? So if your brand is enforcing that, you need to really kind of take a step back and say, what's the condition of my hotel? What shape is it in? Do I need to spend money here, or here? I have a couple hotels right now that are looking to change flags, and the owner has been pushing me on this for, about 2 years. And I said, look, you can do it. Sure. If you want to do it now, that's fine. But you just replaced your case goods about 3 or 4 years ago. So, you're sort of wasting your money unless that brand is going to allow you to, keep those. So it's like, make sure that, and that seems really basic, but make sure if you're going to change flags that you sort of time that up with a large renovation for you as well, as best you can.
Why would an owner want to change flags? Like, what's pushing them? What's driving them?
In this particular market, this hotel, it's a Best Western, and there's no Marriott product in the market. So that's driving them. Also, the owner just is not the biggest fan of a Best Western, just kind of wants to have something nicer. And I think their vision for the product is a little bit more upscale. So that's what they're looking for. But some owners will change it for a number of different reasons. I have another hotel that's looking to partner with Hilton, and, they just think they can get more average rate, maybe a little bit more occupancy by going with Hilton in that case. So, and they want to go to a soft brand instead of a core brand. So, largely they're looking to make more money. That's the most part.
Revenue. Right. Yeah. It's the ROI, right? And I love that you're saying that, because it blends into everything that my whole thesis and everything that I've seen, in that brand is everything, right? When you have a solid brand, a brand that is tied to or perceived as a higher quality experience, you're going to be able to charge more and earn more.
Sure. Yeah. And even if you're independent, you still have your own brand, right? To some extent, right?
Right.
So it's like,
Exactly. But it takes time and it takes active effort to build that brand. I just heard Alex Herbosi he was auditing somebody's business, and he was saying he has two different businesses and one of the businesses wasn't doing so well. They were selling products, and he asked, well, do you have a brand around that product? And he said, not really. It's just generic. And he was like, well, then this other one is working. Shut that one down because there's no brand. I think that is the big difference, right? That perceived value, then you can equate that to actual value. It will deliver a higher return on investment.
yeah, but you can open up Pandora's box and start talking about, how many brands and how many flags and when does that become not as valuable. So
Can you go into that?
I mean, if there's brands that have 35, flags right now, and then they're adding, two a year, at what point in time does the consumer say, we don't really know what the difference is anymore? Like, so I don't
Meaning
know when
it's too diluted.
yeah, I feel like we're approaching that pretty quickly in my mind.
So how do you keep that differentiation and so that doesn't become so diluted?
Yeah, I'm going to argue and say, it goes back to on-property leadership, right? So if you have a good, strong general manager and a good, strong property team, then they can overcome the brand in a lot of ways. So, I mean, because people will pay for better service and better experience and making sure the place is clean and, they know what you like in your room or what room preferences or what have you. So I think that can solve for a lot of it. But I don't know, from a macro perspective, I don't know that I have that answer.
Yeah, it's really, I think there's a triangulation of, service and what the property looks like, and then the reviews as well. Like, I don't think that people go on, OTAs anymore and say it's only the reviews that are going to get them to either book or not. It's multiple different aspects and touch points that will get them to believe in the brand and see it online and say, oh, wow, like I like this property and I want to book here, or I'd be willing to spend a little bit more, especially if the reviews consistently say like that the service was phenomenal. But sometimes because reviews are often faked, there are like properties that do that and consumers can tell. So there has to be that triangulation, like you're saying, in terms of the operational side of things, that they can know that this is the property that they can spend or should spend a little bit more on.
Sure, absolutely.
So how do you, with renovations, how do you work with the designers, contractors, and architects to ensure that everything stays according to budget, and that at the end of the day, that those are the upgrades that are, going to see the highest return?
We just hire a really good project manager and let them run point on it. I mean, it's really a holistic approach, right? You have to make sure everybody's on the same page, that going in, they understand what the budget is and what the vision is, and making sure they kind of stay with that the whole time. I've seen, architects get kind of wild with things, or designers get a little crazy, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, guys, we need to pull this budget way back, or this isn't what we initially said. So you have to keep people grounded and be very clear about what the initial, outcome needs to be.
Do you find that having value engineering meetings at the very beginning and creating budgets and being very particular about the goals of the project, does that help so that midway you don't have to revalue engineer?
No, it doesn't help at all.
Of
course. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a great idea. It's,
I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, wait, it doesn't? What?
Yeah, of course. No, I think it's a really good idea. And just, continuing to have open conversation and dialogue and keeping people updated with the data that's in front of you and saying, okay, hey, look, we thought the mattresses, or maybe it's a bad example, but we thought the, case goods were going to be, 10,000 per room, and now they're coming in at 12,000. So can we shave off something else somewhere else? What can we do in the bathrooms, or do we need to do a different style of door or shower door? Or can we do less tub to shower conversions? I mean, I think there's got to be sort of this give and take from different areas at times.
Yeah, I find that also, like, getting a lot of that out at the beginning, done at the beginning, doesn't happen across the board. It's kind of like, I'll let this person or that person take lead, and there's no standard that everybody is held to. And it's very easy to come up with a concept or renovation and then midway through it needs to be value engineered, rather than at the beginning understanding, like reading through the reviews, understanding what's the gap, what's happening, what are they saying is a problem, and then figuring out the design from that. Like reverse engineering what the competitors are doing, reverse engineering what the consumer is saying is missing from the property, and then everybody being on the same page from the get-go in terms of what the expectations are. Who are we marketing to? Who's going to be at this property, and doing the renovation from there, rather than just purely from an aesthetic perspective. It's very strategic.
Sure. Obviously be smart about who you're sort of choosing to hire from day one, right? Because if you want, somebody who only works on Five Diamond Resorts, well, they're used to, pretty heavy budgets, or, the other way around. So just be smart about that as you're selecting your initial teams.
Absolutely. As an owner's rep, what's the difference, or what are you seeing majorly between like a new build versus existing projects? How do you help owners kind of navigate differently in each scenario?
Obviously new builds are nice because it's sort of a blank slate when you're going in, so you can impact things from a lot of different perspectives, whether that's, franchise selection, management company selection, location of things within the guest room, all kinds of different things you can impact. So that, I wouldn't say that's preferred, but it's nice to go that way. But then again, you have to deal with the challenges and headaches of construction and delays and all the rest of that. And then going in to an existing property, you may have to navigate the challenges of when they're spending money on things, or when have they renovated, and who's the existing team, and who's the existing operator. Do we need to make changes there? And do we need to change flags? So there's a lot more to it. A little messier, I'd say, with existing operations. But it's nice because you should have revenue coming in day one versus 24 months down the road.
Do you get involved in the nitty-gritty of those projects?
Sure. Yeah, all day long.
Yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Unresponsive people. I don't know. It's not my thing. I'm super responsive, and I expect people to be as well. I just can't deal with it otherwise. But
what does super responsive mean to you?
Get back to me within the day, right? Even 24 hours is okay, but I would prefer within the day, right? I'm gonna do that, right? So I expect it's just sort of common courtesy. Even if I can, I might just say, "Hey, saw your email. Really busy. I'll get back to you tomorrow," right? Just give me a minute.
Do you have any systems in place to mitigate slow communication, or that you would like to install as an SOP within to make things easier?
No, I don't necessarily have those systems in place, outside of just communicating those expectations, or, people seeing that I'm responsive. So people sort of, meeting me at that level, right? So no, I don't. Otherwise, I'll just fire the client or fire myself from the job and just move on to work with somebody else that can respond back to me, or find a new GM or find a new management company, or whatever the case is, right? But yeah, it's going to be frustrating. It's surprising. I've seen franchisors be very unresponsive, and it's like, guys, how are we going to get work done if you can't just reply back to one email that I've sent you 10 times now?
Yeah, exactly. It's tough, especially with construction. There's so much going on. There's so much money on the table, and huge decisions, right, that require everybody kind of to do this dance together in like synchronized swimming. Like everybody needs to be on the same page, communicating and being a team. And it's really tough when there's so many different parts. You got the architect and the contractor and the owner's rep and the owner and the designer, and everybody's doing kind of their own dance and not moving in unison. I find that is very challenging and frustrating in so many projects.
Yeah, we have a new build going on right now, and we have the weekly construction calls, so we're getting updates there. But everybody is in the middle of those, whether that's general manager, project manager, construction manager, owner. There's everybody on those calls. So that's really helpful, because it's like, okay, we're all here. We set aside once a week. Let's have our discussion. Let's talk about it. I try to do that on a personal level. Even with my family, it's like, all right, guys, let's just sit down now and powwow for the week. Let's get our schedules synced up, right, and make sure we're all on the same page.
I love that. Yeah, I do that with my husband too. Just like at the beginning of the week, Sundays are planning days. Yeah, to make sure that everything is moving smoothly. How do the smaller hotels compete with larger brands? Can they, especially in terms of driving direct bookings, what would be your advice?
Smaller franchise or independent properties?
Either way.
Yeah, I think they can compete. It's just finding your niche, right? And just understand who's the client you're really going after and needs to stay at your property for one reason or another. I think so much of it is location specific, right? I think you can overcome flags or other challenges with the better locations. So that can be helpful. I mean, you can't go move your hotel, but I think and I think a lot of it goes back to what we talked about with the right service levels and just taking care of people. I think that's helpful, and maybe they've renovated better than the larger ones. It's interesting, right? Because you see some of these big full service properties that just drag on. Their cycles seem to be way further than 15 years. You see like case goods that are pushing like 20, 25 years in some of these hotels. So I think I don't know whether that's probably, based on who the ownership group is, right? It's large institutional groups that are owning these, $100 million, $200 million, $500 million hotels and resorts that sort of get away with that. But then the outlay is a lot, right? The costs to renovate those is pretty significant. So,
right. Do you think that they are really getting away with it? Or do you think that their revenue is ultimately suffering even in a small way?
Yeah, I'm sure the revenue is suffering, but the brand is going to allow it to some extent because if you've got a 500 room hotel in Times Square, you're 5 years past your renovation cycle, it's still driving significant fee value to whoever that franchisor is. So they're like, they'll slap you on the wrist, but ultimately they're not going to pull the flag. Those property owners know that.
It's not significant enough in terms of revenue that they are seeing a need to do the PIP.
Could be. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, And then a lot of those groups are owning 10 and 20 or 100 hotels. So they're just deciding where are we spending our money this year, and they're really smart about allocating that, and they stick to it because they also know they're going to have unscheduled CapEx that's going to pop up on them.
What drives an owner or investor to do the PIP if they haven't, let's say they haven't done it or they're pushing it beyond what it should be? What would drive them to say, okay, we need to do it now?
It could be revenue, right? It could be that they're just seeing that it's just sort of gradual decline in revenue, so they want to do that. It could be QAs, right? So their inspection they're in red zone or whatever the case is. Maybe they got a notice of default. It could be all kinds of things. Maybe there's a new hotel that's being built and they just want to get ahead of it, right? Oddly enough, I have seen some owners renovate right before they sell. I don't know why you would do that, but largely they'll push it off and then go sell the hotel, and then the broker's sort of selling the dream that, well, once you renovate this, you're gonna get $20 more in average rate, and so on and so forth.
Do you see that? Do you see that major increase once they renovate? And what metrics are you tracking to see what kind of interventions led to that?
So we'll look at the star report, see how the hotel is performing compared to the competition now, and then sort of pre-renovation. And then when you're underwriting the deal, you might say, okay, wow, they're past due on their renovation, and that's why they're not able to achieve the same average rate as their comp set is. So once we renovate, we think we can get back to that. But I'd say it all varies. I mean, as we talked about before, there are some hotels that push their renovations off so far that when they renovate, they're sort of just getting even with their competitors and never really getting ahead of them, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not able to push that rate beyond what your competition is doing because you've now renovated to their level, and then they just move up here. So you're in this constant game of trying to play catch up there. So yeah, I would think, looking at your star report and seeing what that shows, but it varies, hotel by hotel.
How do they get ahead? Not just break even, but surpass what their comps are doing?
I mean, I think if you stay in line with that fixed cycle renovation, I think you're okay. I think that will probably get you there if you stick to that 7 and 14 year cycle. Again, it's market dependent. So if you're in a market where there's 20% of the inventory is all new over the last 2 or 3 years, well, then you might have to renovate ahead of those cycles just to get even or move beyond them. But if it's all older supply, you just have to see what is everybody else doing, when do they last renovate, and so on and so forth. And what kind of renovations did they do? Is there something unique that we can do that's, going to set us apart from them?
Yeah, exactly. I think the market just tells you, right? Whether it's the competitors or the reviews, as I mentioned before, or just studying the market and the trends that are happening. The market tells us. As a designer, I don't ever like to come in and tell somebody, oh, I think it's going to be good to do this and that. I'm like, no, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the market says. What does the market say that they want? That's what we need to give them. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? It doesn't matter the type of concept you think you want, if you want to make money and you want to maximize revenue, you ultimately need to study the market and understand how to position the property so that you can achieve maximum ROI.
Yeah, I completely agree.
What about trends? Like, what are you seeing in terms of properties that are doing better, concepts that are doing better than others, locations, and just overall?
It's difficult right now. I think there's a lot of locations that are struggling. I think it's going to be a tough year, honestly. But there are some areas in the South that have seen some significant, impact from various like industrial or manufacturing or something coming into that area. So that could be helpful. Or you're just sort of seeing general growth for different areas. I don't know about. I'm probably not the guy to talk to about the best renovation trends and what you should do there. It's not really my forte, let's say. So I'd have to lean on you for that. But yeah, I don't know. I think you just have to be really particular about, not only what market you're in, but the sub-market, and then even more specifically, really the kind of the street corner that you're, buying or building in, because ultimately it is location for hotels. The flag you can change, right? But you can't change your location. Right. So I got to be smart about that.
Absolutely. Differentiation, I think, is the theme, the through line that keeps coming up again and again from everything we've spoken about. Can you leave our audience with your top 3 tips and advice that you wish, more owners and investors would have if they were, to get started buying a property, or if they were looking to do a PIP?
Hire an asset manager or a consultant ahead of time, not when your property is failing and you're going to hand the keys back to the lender. That would be nice. So I would do that, and hire the right, firm that can help you price out your PIP or cost it out ahead of time, so you understand what the cost is, before you, purchase the hotel. And I think a lot of groups will do that for free as well, because they want to get the business. And I think, again, pay attention to that location that you're looking at. Make sure there's multiple demand generators. Make sure there's not a lot of new supply coming in. You feel pretty comfortable about, a good long track record for future growth for that area.
Amazing. If there was one question you wish I would have asked, what would it be?
I don't know. I think you did a great job.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights with us. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's bhospitalityadvisors.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Tommy Beyer. So great to join you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Yeah, my pleasure.